It's time for the fun part, choosing the right house. But how do you know which one the right one is?
Well, let's go back one step, Nicola. So the first thing to do is work out what you can do, what you can borrow, what you can afford. So after you've sat down with your broker, worked out your borrowing capacity, gone ahead and got a pre-approval, set your limit as to what you can buy a house for. So you then know what type of property you can afford, whether it's a house to live in or an investment property. So setting your parameters in terms of your spending limits will be done with you and the broker, working out how much you can borrow and what your borrowing capacity is and what you can buy a house for. So once that's in place, you know your price point. That's step one. Step two, it's important to know what you're looking for in a property. So what I recommend for you to do here, Nicola, is you write a list of the wants, so what you want in a house, the needs, what you need in a house, and the won'ts, so what you definitely won't accept in a house. So by doing this list, when you are looking at a house, you always start with the won't. So for example, I won't buy a house that is on a train station or next to a train station or next to a train line, or I won't buy a house that's on under a flight path near the airport. So you do your list of won'ts, so what you don't want to buy a house near, or you won't buy a house that's, for example, more than 20 k's out from the city or more than 5 k's away from your parents' house.
So how would I balance what I want and what I can actually afford?
There's probably got to be a little compromise here. So you write your list of what you want. For example, you want a tennis court, swimming pool, gym, but can you afford that? Probably not. So you've got to be realistic of your wants, and that's setting your budget, knowing what you can buy, like we've discussed before, and what are you trying to find in the house. So, for example, do you want a house that's got an ensuite, or do you want a house that has built-in cupboards? So you write your checklist of what you want in a house. So when you are looking at properties, you can actually go through those properties and actually see what's in there that suits your needs and suits what you want. So you've got your list of your wants, but what's really important is working out what you actually need. So what do you need in a house? Because what happens is people buy a house based on what they want, but it's not what they actually need. So they might end up selling that house, and that cost of change over to another house is quite expensive, because then you've got to pay a real estate agent to sell your house, plus stamp duty on the new property as well. So understand your needs of what you're trying to achieve in your first house is probably the most important thing. And that could be, you need a house that's 5 k's out from the city, or no more than 10 k's out from the city, or you need a house that's on the eastern side of town or the western side of town. So you sort of set what your needs are, and then you limit your searches to what you actually need. And then if there's anything that you want that's on that list, then you look into them a bit further. Anything that's on the won'ts, you exclude those. What are some examples of what you think you will need if you were buying, say, your first house to live in, Nicola? Let me set some parameters for you. Say budget, let's go $800,000. That's assuming that you'll finish your degree now, you're earning good money, and you're buying your first house to live in. Budget, call it $800,000 for your first home. So you know you've got your limit there. What do you think you need, knowing what you can afford on a house?
Probably a minimum to 2 to 3 bedrooms, good for resale.
Yep.
And then 2 to 3 bathrooms as well.
2 to 3?
Or 1 to 2. No, obviously 1, but 2 bathrooms as minimum.
Would you prefer a house on a larger block or a smaller block?
Probably a larger block, again for resale, but then that might not be within my budget.
Resale or capital growth?
Both.
Okay. So is that a want or is that a need?
It's probably a want.
Okay. Fair enough.
Because I wouldn't necessarily need that at my age right now.
Yep. So what else do you think you need in a house? Alfresco area, outside area?
I probably wouldn't need an alfresco area, like a full alfresco area.
Yeah, but a veranda at the back?
Yes.
Okay. Garaging?
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. The other things to consider when you are buying your first house is this house might not be your forever home. More than likely won't be your forever home. So it might become a property you buy to get into the property market initially, but in 3 to 5 years' time, you might turn this into an investment property. So you've got to look at all your parameters and all your needs and wants to try to satisfy both those things, and then something that can be a rental later on as well and easy to maintain.
So right now, I would look for something on the eastern suburbs, close to my studies, so it's easily accessible. A smaller block. Easy to maintain.
Yep.
Minimal garden.
Yep, that's a good start. That will limit your options and your searches in. So that's good, Nicola. So now that you understand your wants, your needs, and your won'ts, it's important to try to understand your 3 parameters of beautiful, close, and cheap. So ideally you would like all three, but that's going to be impossible. So you can't get something that's beautiful, close and cheap. So you might have to go close and cheap, but it might be beautiful. Or you might go far instead of close, but it might be bigger and cheap. So, but you're not going to get all three being beautiful, close and cheap. So,
especially for my first house.
Especially for your first house. So there's got to be some compromise there as well. So, yeah, and understanding that it's not going to be perfect, but you've just got to set your needs right and probably your wants right. Understanding that there's got to be some variation from those as well. The other thing that I strongly suggest is go to as many open homes as possible in your research stage, because by doing, and also going to auctions too, so you can actually follow the market and work out where properties are selling for. Use realestate.com. Look at what's sold in areas too. Track properties so you can actually see. So then you'll start going to a house and say, okay, that house there, that's going to go for $750, or that one there, that's going to go for $900. But if you get it for $800, it's going to be a bargain. So by going to open inspections, you'll start to get a better grasp of the property market, but then also get a better understanding of what you like and what you don't like as well. So my suggestion would be to go to as many open inspections on weekends as possible.
Would you recommend to compromise the beautiful, close and cheap, to go for something closer but not as beautiful or a bit of an older house, and then for future things like maybe renovate it? Or
yeah, definitely. So location is very important. So if you were to get something closer to the location where you want to be and it's a good area, and it might be something older which you're happy to live in for the first 5 years, but it's something that you can see yourself adding value to by renovating it or doing an extension. So you might buy something that's old and close but not beautiful, but you live in it, you sacrifice for 3 to 5 years living in this property, knowing that in your career of working and you're earning more money, you can potentially borrow some more money and do an extension and renovate it, and it will be new.
Yeah.
So compromising like that and understanding your future goals. So you set yourself a 5-10 year plan as well. And that is definitely something that you can do.
So any tips for searching for a property?
So there are some tips that I would recommend you follow when you are looking for a property. So once you've started your research, going to open inspections, got an idea of what you are looking for, which areas you are looking in, use realestate.com.au and domain.com.au to set some parameters to notify you when properties do come up for sale. For example, you can set your parameters based on land size, number of bedrooms, garaging, location, suburbs. So you can set your parameters on those websites, which then automatically send you emails if a property comes up that suits your needs. So then you're not on there every day looking for properties. You'll get notifications if something was to come up. The other thing that I'll do is try to get to know as many real estate agents as possible in the area where you're looking, because sometimes things come up for sale. They might give you a call saying and if they know what you're looking for, they might give you a call and say, Nicola, I've got a property that I think will suit you. What do you think of this? So get to know real estate agents, make sure they know who you are, and do your research. Actually, another tip when you're setting your parameters, if your limit is, call it $600,000, set your parameters at say $650 to $700, because there'll be properties that come up that will be priced above that $600,000 mark, but you still want to be aware if they do come up for sale, because it might actually sell for cheaper. So don't just set your limit at say $600,000 if your purchase limit is $600,000. Set your limit say $100,000 above that.
So how can I be sure I'm not overpaying for a property?
It's up to you to do your research and understand the property market. So it's just that's why I said it's very important to go to open inspections, follow the market, see what's actually sold, look at sold lists on those websites as well, see what's sold. You've got to do your research and understand the property market. The other thing that you want to make sure if you're not overpaying is don't necessarily go on the listed price on realestate.com what things have sold for. Go with the actual sold prices. So to research what they've actually sold for. So they might advertise it for $700 to $750, but it might sell for $650. Or it might sell for $850. So just don't look at the listed price, look at the sold price. So
the previous sold price
of a property. So when you're looking at properties, follow it through until it sells and settles. So you go look at a property, you follow it through. If you don't buy it, follow it through to see what it actually sells for and settles for. So then you know that house and you've been through it and say, okay, I know that house. I thought that was worth $650. It actually sold for $750.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. It might have gone below what you thought it was worth. So try to gauge your understanding of the property market by following the sold properties, not what they're listed for.
Any other tips when walking through a home and looking for my perfect first home?
Yeah, I'll take notice of what the actual house looks like compared to the photos. So a lot of real estate agents use Photoshop, or professionals use Photoshop to make the images look good and make the house look bigger than what it actually is.
Yeah.
So don't just rely on the images that they're advertising. Go through the house and actually compare what the images look like to the actual house. Go through and feel the floorboards. For example, are they creaking, or does it feel unstable, the floor? Or go look at the bathrooms and check for things like cracked tiles, because if there's a cracked tile, that can cause waterproofing issues, for example. So just really inspect the property in detail. Look at the kitchen and make sure the kitchen cupboards open and close properly. Make sure the drawers are sliding. Make sure they're not damaged. So
to prevent any things from like negatively impacting my experience of buying a house, do you reckon I should get a building inspection before purchasing it?
Definitely. So if you're very serious about that property, because they do cost money, I'll definitely recommend getting a building inspection on any property that you are going to be bidding on or buying.
So how much does a building inspection actually cost?
Yeah, that ranges depending on where you are, but normally between $500 and $1,000.
And you think that's definitely worth it?
I wouldn't get a building inspection on every property that you like, only on the ones that you're very serious about buying.
And consider buying.
Considering buying, definitely if it's an auction. And you can also get a building inspection if you do buy a property. When you do sign a contract, there is something called cooling off rights. So here in South Australia, for example, you have 48 hours to cool off on that property that you've signed a contract on. So if you sign a contract today, you've got 2 days to pull out of that contract. In that time, what you would do is line up a building inspection or sign that contract subject to building inspection. So then you do get that inspection done before you do buy that property.
Yep.
So I might just touch on cooling off rights when you do sign a contract, because it does vary in each state.
Is that when you're allowed to pull out of a contract when you've...
Correct. Yep. So let's say you sign a contract in your personal name, you actually have the right to pull out of that contract if things aren't right, which gives you the time to do that building inspection or pest inspection that you do need. In the eastern states, so New South Wales, Queensland, ACT, you got 5 working days to cool off.
That's a long time.
Which is quite a long time. In Victoria, you've got 3 days. In South Australia, you have 2 days to cool off.
Yeah.
In Northern Territory, you have 4 days. And in WA and Tasmania, you've got 0 days to cool off. So you sign a contract, you're pretty much got no days to pull out of that contract, unless you've got a clause in that contract, for example, subject to finance or subject to building inspection or subject to pest inspection. So you can put a clause in that contract still. But once you've signed the contract unconditional, or if you buy it at auction, you pretty much got to settle. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because depending on what state you're in is when you do your building inspection and how you would coordinate that. So obviously in the eastern states, you've got 5 days, you've got more time to organise that. In WA, you would need to put that into your contract. So depending on where you are is how you would coordinate that building inspection and get it organised.
So are there any other suggestions about buying my first house?
Something that you may consider is using a buyer's agent. Do you know what a buyer's agent is?
No.
So they're professionals that help you find a property to suit your needs. So they charge you a fee, though, for their service.
Yeah.
So that fee might be $10,000 or it might be a percentage of the property value. So you use a professional to help you find that property that you need. I personally think for your first home and for a house that you want to buy to live in, that especially in South Australia where it's a smaller market and you're studying commerce like you are and have a good understanding of property, I would suggest you do that research yourself and you're out there looking for that property rather than use a buyer's agent. The other thing is that does chew into your deposit. So your first home probably wouldn't be using a buyer's agent to help you find a house. So the key takeaways from this episode, Nicola, understand your wants, your needs and your wants. Create a list. Also understand the concept of beautiful, close and cheap. So you might not get all three, but understand those three things: beautiful, close, and cheap. Research the market. So go to as many open inspections as possible and follow the sold properties. See what they've actually settled for and sold for to get an idea of what the property market's doing for the properties that you're looking at buying. So follow the property market, get to know real estate agents, and make sure they know who you are, that you're looking as well. And use the online tools that are available to you, like Real Estate and Domain. Set your parameters up in there, get notified when properties come up that suit your needs.
I had no idea calling off was so different in every state. That's why you guys are on this journey with me to learn the things I'm learning from my dad. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. My name's Nicola Kef, and I'll see you next week.